in recent years. So it was a great privilege to be part of an ecumenical group. We were all women, and we were visiting projects run by different denominations in that country where there is division, suffering and persecution. And as has already been said, Christians are really and truly involved in the transformation of individuals and communities. And my overall impression was really how much the Christians are being a reconciling presence and a blessing, often to those who are not seen as significant. I had a quote that I was reading recently from the Anglican Bishop of Egypt, Bishop Munir, who we met, who said, "We believe in building bridges within our society between different faith communities and Christian denominations. Our ultimate aim is to be peacemakers." As we've heard, doing what Christians are there to do. Now, for many people in this country, when someone mentions Egypt, you probably think of nice hotels by the Red Sea and pyramids. On our last day, we were driven, so we could just see a pyramid in the distance, and we could at least say that we'd seen one. That is not the reality of most people's lives in Egypt. As you drive along busy main roads, you see numerous half-finished buildings, some of which are already falling down, tall, thin, narrow brick buildings housing lots of families. And when you turn off the main roads, you enter densely populated communities. The roads become dust and dirt. If you're like us, you had police with you the entire time, but might pick up on that later. But you very quickly become aware of the extreme poverty and the very unhealthy living conditions. We were only there for a week, but in that time we visited and heard about a huge number of projects supported by Embrace. And I want to say what an amazing charity they are. I went already being a supporter, but I came back even more humbled and inspired by all that they do. We were looking at projects particularly focusing on work with women and girls. You will be, I'm sure, familiar with the truth that women and girls are not treated as equal to men and boys. There are many barriers to their education and to their economic flourishing, and incidences of sexual violence often remain hidden, and there's a very, very high incidence of female genital mutilation. So time is short, we want time for questions, so I just want to give you just a few glimpses of some things we saw. The social care of the Anglican Church is called Episcocare, and one of their projects, supported by Embrace, is in a poor area of Alexandria. In a centre there, we saw just amazing work going on, a very inspiring nursery school, young children, boys and girls, Christian and Muslim, learning to read and write, girls learning to read and write equally alongside boys. We observed women's health education and literacy. And one of the projects which sticks out in my mind, and I know sticks out in Rachel's mind, is a wonderful project called My Dear Daughter. I think we were probably sort of moved to tears really there. We were in a tiny room and we encountered this project with pairs, young women about university age, some are at university, with younger, much younger girls who are like their younger sisters, their younger daughters. And the older girls provide them with educational and emotional support. And we listened to the stories of mutual self-esteem of both the mentor and the mentee. And it was very evident, even the way they stood together. The older girls were being very protective of the younger girls. And we heard the younger girls saying things about how they'd felt they'd been half human until that point. That I remember one young girl, probably about 8 or 9, saying that she recently felt she'd found her voice, that she was worth something. So this is one of the projects being supported in this community. We also had the privilege of speaking with a number of women who have been recipients of microloans. Again, really inspiring stories from quite small amounts of money. Although it's an initiative of the Christian community, supported by Embrace, it's actually benefiting all people. We met Muslim women who are being supported by giving these microloans. We heard how relatively small amounts of money are transforming lives. Women are being able to establish businesses, often alongside their husbands, and that's an interesting dynamic. And what I loved about so many of these microloans is that they were benefiting everyone. So for example, one woman who was buying fresh vegetables from farmers, so benefiting farmers, then bagging the vegetables and with her husband selling them in the local community, who were then receiving good vegetables. We heard another story. It wasn't someone we met. We heard a wonderful story of a woman who'd been given a microloan to set up a bakery. She'd been given the money. She could buy the grain from the local farmer who knew he had a customer. In the village then, there was a bakery. The woman was being able to even employ some of her neighbours to help her, and that community was receiving good, fresh bread. Everyone is benefiting. I was particularly struck by a Muslim mother who was talking about the day she was walking back home with her children, really down. She knew that she had no more clothing for her children, no more food. She was living in this slum area. And she'd only been home for about an hour, and there was someone knocking on the door. And it was the local Anglican priest with another woman, and they gave her food and clothes, and in time she's now the recipient of a microloan. And she spoke of the love being shown to her by Christian neighbours. This is how division is being broken down, because people are sharing that practical, loving hope of transforming communities. Another visit which really stands out for me, and I've put a few photos on this sheet, and there are one or two slides on here, was a visit to one of the Zabaleen communities. These are the communities where people live amid huge piles of rubbish. It literally is like a village on a garbage tip. And the people collect and sort the rubbish, and many of those people would be Christian. And there was a wonderful centre in the community we visited called the Salam Centre, and it's run by the Coptic Church, and in the middle of this centre is the most wonderful Coptic convent with extremely dedicated sisters. And in the Salam Centre, we walked into this room, probably not much bigger than this, crowded with women who told us, just couldn't keep quiet because they just wanted to tell us stories of their empowerment as they were receiving literacy, health, community education. And you'll see one of the pictures is actually of some of the women themselves. You can see some of the crowded buildings in the background. And these women are going back to their local communities to be ambassadors. There they are, being the ones who are going back to their communities. And many of those women told us how they are being catalysts for transformation, not least where female genital mutilation is concerned. They're going back to those communities and saying, we shouldn't be doing this to our daughters and granddaughters. It's not part of our religion, not part of our faith. It was just wonderful, again, seeing the transformation they are being in their communities. And I think for me in all of this, the words dignity and potential are writ very large in my mind. If I had longer, I could tell you about the evangelical churches working with women rescued from abusive relationships, including sex working. The work led by Bless, the social services arm of the Coptic Church in Cairo, headed up by wonderful Bishop Yolios. Oh, look, just there, do I say it? How amazing is that? There he is with us. Must have been meant. But let me offer just a few closing reflections so we can have some questions. Everywhere we went, we encountered Christians who were not scared of sharing their faith and telling their personal stories. But that was not their starting place. Their starting place was being motivated by sharing the love and hope of Jesus Christ in transformative ways, and particularly, as we've heard, being with the poor. And it's about being with all people, loving neighbour as themselves. It was their great desire to share God's love in so many practical ways. And if conversations about Christ became part of that, so be it. But that wasn't the starting place. It's also really striking that the projects are not about doing things to people. It's not about people coming in and giving their expertise and doing things to people. All the projects embrace support and indeed embrace themselves. It's about doing things with people. It's about training and equipping people to be the change they want to see, and embrace only support projects, which actually are about supporting local people to be that change themselves. And what we saw on our visit was Christians sowing seeds of hope and life. I'm so glad that on one of the pictures, it's not there, thought it might just be there at the same time. It's one, you'll see vegetables growing in the amazing Egyptian desert between buildings. On our final evening, when Rachel and I with the others sat around reflecting on all we'd experienced, we talked about the many spaces we had seen where fruit and vegetables were growing, often in cramped spaces, often in very, very poor areas. And that became something for me of a metaphor, something of a metaphor of what the Christians are enabling, because all of it is about flourishing. It's about people made in the image of God being enabled to flourish. It's about land and communities being able to flourish. And for me, it's best illustrated by the final picture you've got here, which is this amazing scent, which I know Archbishop Angelos knows very well, of anaphora in the middle of the Egyptian desert. It was established by probably one of the holiest people I think I've met, a wonderful Coptic bishop called Bishop Thomas. And it's called anaphora, and that literally means lifted up. It provides a place in the desert of rest, healing, refreshment, retreat, all rooted in God's love and hope. One of the projects we encountered is Soteria, which provides residential courses for women who've experienced sexual, physical or emotional abuse, who come in from their local communities. They spend time there, they receive that support they need, and then they go back to their communities and they're supported in their communities where they too can become agents of transformation. But at the core of anaphora is the most beautiful irrigation system. You can just see some of the blue there. It's an amazing irrigation system, giving life to trees, plants, vegetables, livestock, and indeed people. Interestingly, if you go up high enough and look down, the irrigation system is in the shape of a question mark. And at the dot sits a beautiful tiny chapel. That's a lot for me about how you can bring your questions, your hopes, your fears, and come to this place of retreat in the middle of the desert. It's a place of hope and possibility and flourishing. And for me, that sums up all that Embrace is committed to with Christians in the Middle East. And I'd just like to repeat what Tim has said, that I really would encourage you to engage with Embrace, perhaps even go and see their work for yourselves. But it's left a deep impression on me, and I've come back a different person. And I hope they'll go on drawing on the stories and the imagery that I have seen in Egypt. So